In the annals of military history, wars are usually remembered for their epic battles, the clash of empires, and the fates of nations. But hidden in the dusty back pages of Australia's past lies a conflict so strange, so absurd, that it almost feels like satire. It is a war fought not against men, but against birds. Not against an army, but against nature itself. This is the story of the Great Emu War of 1932, a campaign where machine guns rattled across the Australian outback, and the enemy, unrelenting, fast, and oddly organized, was a flightless bird that refused to yield. The year is 1932. The Great Depression has cast its long shadow across the world. Australia, a young nation barely 3 decades into its existence as a federation, is struggling. For years, the government had encouraged returning World War I veterans to settle the vast, underpopulated expanses of Western Australia. They were given land in hopes of becoming farmers, producing wheat, supporting the empire, and building new lives after the horrors of the trenches. But farming in the harsh Australian climate was never easy, and when the global wheat market collapsed during the Depression, the dream of prosperity withered. These soldier settlers, once promised stability and dignity, now found themselves battling poverty and despair. And then came the emus. Emus are strange creatures. Towering nearly 2 meters tall, weighing over 40 kilograms, and capable of running at 50 kilometers an hour, they are formidable survivors. They travel in flocks, migrating after breeding season from inland Australia toward the coast in search of food and water. In normal times, this migration passed with little note. But in late 1932, the rains failed. Crops were scarce, and the emus, some 20,000 strong, descended on the wheat fields of Western Australia like an unstoppable tide. They trampled fences, destroyed farmland, and devoured crops. For struggling farmers already on the brink of ruin, it was nothing short of disaster. The settlers cried out for help, and in response, the government reached for an unlikely solution: the army. Major G.P.W. Meredith of the Royal Australian Artillery was dispatched to the front. Alongside him were 2 soldiers, armed with Lewis machine guns, weapons designed for the battlefields of the Great War, and 10,000 rounds of ammunition. The plan was simple: suppress the emus, protect the crops, and restore order. The newspapers, with a mixture of seriousness and sarcasm, began referring to the campaign as a war. Few could have predicted how literal that description would soon feel. In November of 1932, the campaign began. The soldiers set up near a watering hole where hundreds of emus had gathered. The plan was to ambush the flock, mowing them down in large numbers. The machine guns were loaded. The soldiers took aim. But the emus were not so easily defeated. As the guns rattled, the flock scattered into smaller groups, sprinting in all directions. Their speed and agility made them nearly impossible targets. What should have been a slaughter turned into chaos. Only a handful of birds were killed. The rest disappeared into the scrub, vanishing like ghosts. Major Meredith later described the emus with grudging respect. If we had a military division with the bullet-carrying capacity of these birds, it would face any army in the world. They can face machine guns with the invulnerability of tanks. The soldiers tried again and again. They chased the emus with trucks, mounting machine guns on the back in an attempt to turn the battle into a mobile offensive. But the rough Australian terrain made driving nearly impossible. The trucks bounced and broke down, the guns jammed, and once again, the emus scattered before serious damage could be done. At times, the soldiers were mocked by the sight of emus simply outpacing their vehicles. It was as though nature itself was laughing at the folly of human ambition. By the end of the first week, only a few dozen birds had been killed. For another month, the campaign dragged on. Reports were sent back to Canberra, the capital, describing the futility of the effort. Ammunition was wasted, equipment was strained, morale was collapsing. The press delighted in mocking the campaign, publishing exaggerated accounts of the cunning emu army outwitting the military. For the government, it was turning into an embarrassment. By December, the operation was quietly called off. The official tally claimed that a few hundred emus had been killed, but this was a pitiful number compared to the tens of thousands that roamed free. The Great Emu War was over, and the emus had won. The farmers remained furious. Their crops were still being destroyed, and their livelihoods remained precarious. But no further military aid was offered. Instead, the government eventually subsidized fencing, leaving the farmers to fend for themselves. The emus returned each year, as they always had. Nature had proven, once again, that it could not be subdued by brute force alone. The war faded into the background of history, resurfacing occasionally as a joke or an oddity. But for the farmers who lived through it, there was little humor. To them, it had been one more indignity in a decade defined by hardship. The Great Emu War has become one of Australia's strangest legends, a story of man's arrogance colliding with nature's resilience. It is easy to laugh at the absurdity of soldiers with machine guns failing to defeat birds. But beneath the comedy lies a darker truth. A nation grappling with economic collapse, veterans left to struggle alone, and a government desperate for quick solutions. The emus, in their own way, became symbols of resistance. Not soldiers, not enemies, but reminders that in the harsh land of Australia, survival belongs to the stubborn, the swift, and the untamed. In the end, the emus marched on, and the soldiers went home. This was the story of the Great Emu War, a conflict unlike any other. If you enjoyed uncovering this forgotten piece of history, consider joining me again as we continue to reveal the strange, the hidden, and the unbelievable tales of Australia. Because sometimes, truth really is stranger than fiction.